Again, thanks everybody for joining us today, and we're excited to learn more about nutrition after yesterday's beautiful pre-competition session. I definitely learned a lot about priming, and I didn't even know the words, so that was great. My name is Torsten Gohl. I'm the Executive Director for Table Tennis in the Northwest Territories. My gender pronouns are he and him, and in the spirit of reconciliation, Table Tennis North acknowledge that we live, work, and play within many traditional territories. And our physical office and training center is situated on the sacred lands of the Dega Gautier, what is also known as the River People, here in the Treaty 11 territory. And thanks for joining, and I hand it over to you, Kellyanne.
Thanks, Thor. Welcome, everyone. This is our second of the series, as we mentioned. And in the other day, we spoke about nutrition to prepare to compete. So now we're moving into during competition. And as you've already heard my introduction before, but just a quick overview, I'm a registered dietitian. I've been working with athletes for many, many years. It's a pleasure to work with athletes in so many different sports, including table tennis. I now reside in Kelowna, and I'm seeing athletes, clients individually, virtually, and then I'm also on contract with the CSI, Canadian Sport Institute, Calgary, where I'm working right now with two national teams, our men's para hockey, formerly known as sledge hockey, and Golf Canada Women. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. There we go. And the idea was just to understand who is all attending our sessions here, your name and your sport. And I think we've got an athlete here with us. Kathleen is in table tennis. And which games are you going to be going to, Kathleen? Oh, okay. Silence on that front. That's okay. We'll move on then. So I wanted to look at nutrition relative to the Arctic Winter Games and also Canada Winter Games, both coming up right away here in 2023. So here's the plan. We're going to do a very quick review of the fun facts around nutrition and food fundamentals, just to set the stage and understanding where food fits, especially as we get into competition. And then specifically, what are the objectives with nutrition when you want to compete? And then, of course, most importantly, we'll spend the bulk of our time with some tips. And I will be sharing the slides with you. There is a lot of information, but we'll share those slides with you as a PDF afterwards, so you can also reflect back and make some personal notes for how each of you can prepare to compete. Sorry, Kathleen says your Zoom is a little slow. That's okay, not to worry. Put you on the spot though, didn't I? Okay, so moving forward, review. We spoke about energy as an athlete. You get fuel to give you energy for your activities that are either a source of carbohydrate, proteins, or fats. We call these the macronutrients. Macro meaning you need these in large quantities. Micronutrients, those would be the vitamins and minerals that we need in much smaller micro amounts. So for your macros, we spoke about carbohydrates as being plant-based foods. So that would be all your grains like corn, rice, bread, all your fruits, all your vegetables, milk and yogurt. If you look at the nutrition facts, the main energy is carbohydrate, sport drinks like Gatorade, Powerade, juice, and then legumes. While some athletes will use beans towards the protein, of course they give us some, but technically they're much higher in the carbohydrates. They're plant-based foods. Proteins, eggs, fish, beef, game meat, chicken, turkey, grouse, whale, Greek yogurt, tofu, cheese, and nut butters. I put a star by those because technically they have more fat than protein, but they certainly contribute towards protein in your diet as well. Healthy fats, all the different oils, butter, nuts, seeds, cheese, and nut butters like peanut butter, avocado, chia, hemp, lots of different sources there. So that's review on the energy. Can you remember which do we digest the quickest? Carbohydrate, protein, or fat? Carbohydrate is right. Okay, then, what do you digest the slowest? And this is kind of important when we talk about nutrition during competition. If you eat something that digests slowly, it might sit quite heavy and make your tummy feel upset when you're trying to compete. So the slowest digesting food would be, it is fat. And as we saw earlier, this is an illustration of how food is digested in terms of the speed. So when you don't have much time between events, we go with carbohydrates. When you have more time, especially if you're in tournament play, and there might be 2 hours between your games, your matches, then you could have something more substantial by adding protein and fat. We also spoke about, depending on how intense your exercise, your competition, the greater the intensity in terms of a higher heart rate when you work hard. Of course, your heart's going to beat faster when you're working at a maximal effort. And in that case, carbohydrate is the main fuel at high intensity. As we see here, athletes across the bottom is 0 to 100. Just think of that as effort. 100% is like maximal effort, sprinting, explosive movements when you're on the court with table tennis. While you're sitting idle at low effort, you're using the green one line, and that's more fat. But see what happens with this shift as the intensity increases across the bottom, your shift in fuel increases to more carbohydrates. So how maximal is your effort when you compete? Is it low intensity? Are you using more fat? Or is it carbohydrate with high intensity efforts? This is why most sports athletes are using carbohydrate as the fuel, and it's often the limiting factor for your performance. So carbohydrate's the main fuel from most athletes with exercise when you compete. So let's take a look at how your body has this fuel available inside. Well, first of all, when we eat carbohydrates like fruits, vegetables, rice, corn, and other starchy foods, those are all carbohydrates. Eventually, you digest them and break them down, and it's now sugar or glucose in your blood. And that's the main fuel that your brain is using. And your brain is your computer. If you haven't eaten for a while, your computer is lagging, and we'll see that your skills aren't as sharp. Your energy is not as good. So by eating often and having good energy, your brain is energized and able to focus and concentrate and technically execute. Athletes, we store carbohydrate. The fitter you are, the more you store. It's called glycogen in your muscle, and that's stored, but we don't have a lot of storage there. It's a small tank in your muscles. As glycogen, you can only store about 2 hours of energy for one day. If you're in a tournament, chances are you might be working hard for more than 2 hours in one day, and especially if you have back-to-back days of competition. In other words, you really got to stay on top of your nutrition to be consistent, to have good energy day after day, especially with tournament play. Okay, so hopefully that was a bit of a review. Let's talk about objectives. What are some of the goals with our nutrition when you go to compete? Well, we want you to be as energized when you're in the finals as you are when you started the competition. So what we're talking about is just being as consistent as possible. And nutrition is a key piece to help to keep you consistent and energized from the start of your competition all the way through to the end. So if you're someone that tends to kind of lose a little bit of energy midway in your competition, Could be a nutrition piece. Another objective, we need you to stay hydrated. In other words, showing up hydrated. Keep drinking enough so that you stay in that good hydration state. We want to avoid, in other words, becoming dehydrated. More on that and why that's a big problem. We also want to look at nutrition to help to support your focus, your concentration, your decision making, and technically how you're performing with your skills. Nutrition is key for all of these aspects. All right, so we're going to move on to the serious part of this session, and those are specific tips around nutrition to support you in competition. When you compete, you all need water. Some of you might need electrolytes like sodium, potassium. Those are minerals, electrolytes. When you sweat, have you ever noticed that on your skin it's kind of like crystals? You taste it, it's salt. You have salt, sodium that you are excreting when you're sweating. That's the main mineral that we lose when we sweat, is sodium. Sodium is an electrolyte. So if you're an athlete who sweats a lot, if you're an athlete who tends to get muscle cramps, you're probably someone who's going to need some electrolytes, especially sodium, while you're competing. As you'll see in the presentation here, some of you might also need to eat while you're competing, or at least when there's little breaks. And that would be providing carbohydrates as food energy to keep you going, especially if you're working more than 2 hours in a day. Count your warm-up, count your event, and your cool down. Remember, we only store energy in our body to be able to work hard for about 2 hours. So if your event in a day is more than 2 hours, definitely look at chances when you can try to eat to keep you going. Let's talk a little bit about the hydration piece. Athletes, on this slide, I have 10 items. 7 of these are signs of dehydration. I don't expect you to know them all. Can you help us identify even 4? So let's take a look. There are 7 of these 10 reflect signs and symptoms of dehydration. Which ones do you think are going to be those signs? Is it dark colored urine, dizziness, low energy, slow reaction time? Is it thirst, headache, muscle cramps, elevated heart rate, overheating, or irritability? Can you see 4? Are you ready?
I mean, it seems like all of them.
Well, there's 7. And dizziness, one could argue that that might be a sign of dehydration. I think that's mostly to do with low sugar in the blood, low glucose. What about thirst? So the latest science says you might be thirsty and you need to drink, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm dehydrated because I'm thirsty. So dark colored urine, low energy, slow reaction time, headache, muscle cramps, elevated heart rate, and overheating are all signs of dehydration. I'm not going to go into too much specific yet because I do have some questions to ask you before we really talk about this whole process of losing fluid. Did you know that your body is over 60% water? Look at the water line on this individual. If we were to take all the water in your body and push it down from the tip of your head, it would probably stop around your sternum, that pointy bit in your ribs. And that's how much water. That's a huge amount. The more muscular you are, the higher the percent water in your body. Your brain, muscle, the liver, and your heart by weight are about 75% water. Huge water content. Well, that explains the muscle cramps. we have 2, 3, maybe 4 million sweat glands. And I'm answering my question here already. Their main purpose is to keep you cool. So that's why we sweat. Let's talk about that process. When you're as an athlete, we often say you need to warm up. What we're talking about is we need your muscles to get warm. And as you exercise, your muscles do get warm, but we need to remove that heat from your muscles because they're going to overheat. So blood flows to your muscles, takes that heat away, and blood flows to your skin where you have all these sweat glands. And then the water comes through your skin. That's sweat. You know what I'm talking about. But that water is coming out of your blood. And it's your blood that carries oxygen to give your muscles energy. So here's the deal. As you sweat, we're moving that water, the heat from your muscle to the skin. But now your blood ends up being very thick because you're losing all the watery part of it. So then your heart says, well, now I've got to work harder because the blood is so thick. When your blood is thick like that, heart rate goes up. You might overheat because it's hard to get rid of all that heat your muscles generate. That's the whole connection with all those signs and symptoms of dehydration, overheating, higher heart rate, and so on. Dehydration. It's not just endurance athletes that suffer with performance effects when they're dehydrated. If you're doing a power, speed, explosive activity like table tennis, and if you become dehydrated, you're going to be slower. Your reaction time is slower. Your skills are not as good. Your brain, it's 75% water. If you're dehydrated, your brain's not sharp, right? Premature fatigue. All of this can be avoided. So, athletes, on average, an athlete is losing how much of sweat during an hour of hard work or competition? For those that are here, do you want to put an answer in the chat? What do you think? A, B, C, D, or E, or put in the amount, your guesstimate. On average, what are we thinking? Thor says 1.7. Anyone else? Ready for the answer? It is 1.2. There you go, 1.2 liters. Interesting. That's on average. Now, one athlete might lose less than half a liter. Another athlete might sweat more than 2 liters in an hour. It's so individual. And you probably know some athletes, they're always soaked. They've always got, a lot of sweat all over them. And someone else doesn't sweat as much. Part of that's genetics, your family history, but also if you're dehydrated, your body won't be able to sweat very much because it can't afford to. So we spoke earlier with the priming and pre-competition about drinking when you wake in the morning, drinking throughout the day before you compete. But during competition itself, even if you sweat more than a liter per hour, it's thought to be pretty good if you drink about half a liter. We don't expect you to drink exactly the amount that you lose in sweat, but you should all be drinking at least half a liter for every hour of exercise competition. I think that means you'll need to know the size of your water bottle. For example, the Gatorade bottle that this goalie is drinking on the screen, that's 900 mils. So basically, he needs to drink at least half of that for every hour. How many hours are you competing? How much do you need to drink? If you have back-to-back days of competition, you definitely want to make sure you're drinking lots at the end of your day so that when you go to the bathroom and it looks like pale, dilute lemonade, apple juice, if that's what you see when you go to pee, void, we call it, then that is too dark. Apple juice is too dark. especially want to rehydrate, as I said, if you've got back-to-back days. So if you're competing in 1 hour, an athlete mostly needs, during that hour, do they need carbohydrates, protein? How about some fat like almonds? How about fluids, maybe electrolytes? Or what about sport drink, Gatorade? Do you want to put your answer in the chat? During an hour of competition. Is it Thor? He says fluids, water, and maybe electrolytes. Way to go, you got it. Ta-da. Definitely, during 1 hour, if you're hungry during a 1 hour competition, oh, that tells me you didn't eat properly before the event. You should be able to participate in a 1 hour competition with just needing to drink water, maybe add some electrolytes like G2. G2 is Gatorade without the sugar, it's just the electrolytes. So during competition, if it's an hour or less, we're looking at water, maybe some electrolytes. If you are competing in your event is longer than an hour, more than an hour, you'll need water, definitely electrolytes, and also some kind of energy. Is that in a sport drink? Is that a juice box? Maybe some fruit? Maybe that's a bar, like a granola bar, a sport bar, could be a muffin, a bagel, things that will be available to you at the games. Now, if there's special foods that you like, you might want to put them in your suitcase and bring them along. So you have a tub of Gatorade or some bars that you like to have, or maybe you like to have dried fruit during competition. These little tubes here are Noon tablets. They're electrolytes. There's no carbohydrate in them. The little fizzy tablets, athletes put them in their water. That could be something to bring, especially with indoor events. Like your games are going to be indoors, a lot of the events, not all of them, but for those events indoors, sometimes athletes sweat more indoors than outdoors because it could get really warm in a gym. So maybe bringing some electrolytes like G2 or these Noon tablets could be very helpful. Other energizing food choices during competition. Do you want to bring some fig bars? Can you get a juice box from the dining hall? How about some fruit? A granola bar? Maybe take an extra bagel from breakfast or bring some dried fruit. If you have allergies, a nice fruit source, dried fruit bar made by Sunripe, there's no nuts in it, so that would be a nut-free choice. And if there's special sport bars that you like, maybe Cliff Bar, then bring some, or maybe the Stinger bars are nice too. So some of you might have events where you're done after one event for the day, but then you have another day. Someone else might have multiple events, like in a tournament, or if someone's racing or playing different games, they might have multiple competitions in one day. So the question is, how much time are you going to have between these competitions? And sometimes you just don't know until you get going and find out, oh, I've only got 45 minutes, or maybe I've got 2 hours. So that time between your events in a day is going to vary. And if you're prepared and have food with you, you're not going to stress about it because you've got stuff available, whether it's a short break or maybe it's a longer break. I did mention before, try to make it somewhat healthy choices when you are competing so that you're going to feel energized. The problem is, if you're eating foods that are less nutritious, it just might make you feel really sluggish. It gives you quick energy, like these jelly beans or M&Ms, but that energy just doesn't last. It's okay at the end of your day to say, oh, I've had a good day of competition. I'm going to have a dessert with my meal or a cookie. No problem there. But throughout the day, if you can try to keep it to pretty healthy choices. So if you have back-to-back events, You might want more than just a few bites of fruit. Maybe there's time to have a sandwich. Maybe there's more time to even have like some chocolate milk and fruit, or a bar and a shake. Maybe you've got enough time between your events to even get a meal. Honestly, you'll need about 2 hours, I would say, to have a meal between events. And those would be, consider them pre-competition. If you're eating between events because you're preparing for your next event, right? Chicken and rice, maybe it's a sandwich, maybe it's a sub, maybe it's a pasta meal. What's available? They'll probably have some lunch bags for you to take from the dining hall that you can have as a bag lunch to have if there's at least like 2 hours between your events. The most important meal of the day for athletes is it breakfast, lunch, maybe dinner? Do you think it's what you have before competition or maybe after competition? What do you think? Do you want to put it in the chat? Thor says, hey, breakfast. Oh, it's so important. You're right. But you know what? As an athlete, most important, what would be your second choice, Thor? Would it be after competition? Breakfast is very important for sure. They're all important. But after competition is particularly important when you're competing the next day too, right? If you're done for the day, for the tournament, for the meet, then we're okay. But we're competing right away after competition. Okay, there's 4 foods on the screen. If I told you, I'm sorry, you can only have one of these as your recovery option, which one do you think is the best? Now let's talk about this a moment. I want you to think, what's your body's priority? What's the number one goal for your body with recovering after competition? The almonds have protein, but a lot of fat. The coconut water is high in potassium. The granola bars, those would be carbohydrates. And then the whey, well, that's a protein supplement. Any guesses? Which one do you think is the most important part of recovery? Thor says, sadly, I have to leave. Oh, Amelia, thanks for joining us. The most important recovery is coconut water, maybe? Well, our body needs carbohydrates. Granola bar, hydration, of course, they're all important, but if your body's, the number one priority would be get to re-energize, to put fuel back in the muscles. Really, there's 5 R's to recovery, as I'd like to refer to them, are restore energy. That's carbohydrate, like a fruit, a sport drink, a bar, chocolate milk, granola bar. Repair your muscles with protein. Protein could be in a bar or that chocolate milk. Rehydrate with fluids, coconut water, chocolate milk. It has everything, doesn't it? Water, sport drink, replace your minerals. Remember the salt on your skin from sweating. That would be sport drink, putting salt on your food. And the 5th R, real quick. We want to get to this right away. In fact, there's 2 parts to recovery. The immediate, within 30 minutes since your last effort. So if you're playing in a tournament and you want to watch your teammates, don't forget about your needs. You need to stop and go get some food. Well, at least you're watching your teammates compete, especially if you've got another day of competition. The first part is immediate within 30 minutes. The second part is the recovery meal, and you want to consume that within 2 hours since you finished your event. So can you bring to your competition some fruit, juice box, Maybe some dried fruit. Can you get some sport drink for your carbohydrates? Are there bars that you can find or bring? Chocolate milk? And some athletes even like to bring these, Boost or Ensure. You would have to bring this from home. They won't have these at the games. And these could travel in your suitcase. They don't need to be kept cold in the fridge like chocolate milk does. So those could work, Ensure or Boost. So bring a couple of items to have on hand. It makes such a difference with your recovery. What else can you bring? Maybe something that's got protein. Could be the Boost drink, a protein bar, the chocolate milk. Definitely the priority gets at least some carbohydrates. If you can get some protein in too, that's really great. And don't forget your fluids. What's interesting, athletes, that we know if an athlete is consuming a drink that has sodium, salt in it, like G2 or Gatorade, it helps you keep more water in your body because sodium attracts water. We also know that many athletes will drink more when there's a flavor in their beverage. And then finally, your recovery meal. You've seen this plate before. This is the same plate as your priming meal, right? Where we've got half of your plate as your starch. Remember, that's at least 2 fists of cooked starch, maybe 3 if you've really been working hard. Protein-wise, we said that's the palm of your hand, even the thickness of your palm when it's cooked. If you say, I can eat 2 palms, great, but have at least 1 meat, fish, chicken, turkey, pork, game meat, size when it's cooked. And let's not forget our veggies and then healthy fats that we use to prepare this meal. I do have some examples of recovery meals. It might be pasta. This is where lasagna would be good. Maybe it's some baked fish and quinoa. Are you having a vegetarian meal? Maybe some scrambled eggs and toast. Roll that together in a tortilla. I've got that as an idea. A sub, couple of sandwiches, pasta salad. Throw in some veggies there and some protein like fish or chicken. If it's late, maybe a toasted bagel, some peanut butter, and a protein shake. Now, some of these might not be all doable at the games, but the hot meals, they'll for sure have that, and sandwiches for you, and they'll have a lot of gluten-free options for sure, and cater to different allergies. If you have an allergy for milk or gluten or nuts, not to worry. Always ask if you need help in the dining hall to find the foods that work for you. If you don't see what you need, please talk to someone. They'll make sure that you get what you need. So don't walk away and miss out on your meals. Don't be afraid to ask. So the recovery meal is a priming meal for the next day to compete. Remember, we spoke about priming, especially when you're competing the next day. And there you have it. So how many of these things can you prepare in advance? Are you going to organize and bring some foods that you need? Maybe a sport drink powder. Bring your own water bottle so you know how much you're consuming. Are there certain foods that you like to have during competition? Maybe some dates, some fig bars, granola bar that you like. Can you bring these things with you to the games so that you're prepared and we don't have to worry and try to find these once you get to the games? There certainly will be foods in the dining hall that you'll be able to take a bag lunch. But if there's certain things that you'd like, I really would suggest to prepare. Any questions or comments?
I think one of the questions that I have is some of our athletes might not be competing right away in the beginning. So they will just sit around, they will warm up a little bit, but they will not compete. Like any tips and tricks for them?
So there also, remember, we want to prepare for when they are competing, and continue to eat well so you've got great energy on those days when you're not competing, but you're still training hard. So the recovery and everything that I mentioned here is going to be very important to stay hydrated. I would caution around the dining hall and the buffet, because there might be a lot of foods out and about, and it might be tempting to see the things like all baked goods and cookies. And we talk about athletes, please don't eat your way out of a medal, right? So in other words, pace yourself to eat like you would normally, make healthy choices at home, and keep up with eating well and eating often. But think about staying focused and supporting your training days as well, staying hydrated. Good question, Thor.
I love that, to be ready for whatever comes your way. That's a really good point. Yeah, thank you for that.
Good.
No, I think that's all. I don't
Good.
think I have any more questions on that. Thank you very much again for making it easy for us, and we'll share the video, and I think everybody will be appreciative to learn a little bit more and just get some tips and tricks out of what you mentioned tonight. So thank you very much, Kellyanne.
Thank you. And if there are any questions from the athletes, I certainly don't mind if they want to send me a message through email, through my Gmail. That would be just fine. Just please let me know I'm so and so and from which sport, and so I know who you are. But I certainly don't mind if there's some questions, and I can help you guys to perform at your best. And good luck.
Perfect.
Have fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thanks for everything, Kellyanne.
Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.